What kind of money do you need in retirement? And once again, you and I both agree with the term. We don't like to use the word retirement, but it's basically stepping back a little bit from the operation and still being involved and still having a participatory role, but doing a little bit less and allowing your successor to grow and to allow them to make some small mistakes along the way. Here, what the individual had done is the children went out, and some of them got professional designation, some of them ended up doing well in other businesses, and then they came back to the company and said, we would like to participate. Here are the skill sets that I have. Do you have a need for somebody with these skills?
Welcome to the Farm Family Harmony podcast. I'm Elaine Fraze, Farm Family Coach, here with another episode full of transition tips, tactics, and sometimes hard truths to get harmony on your farm. Hi, folks. It's Elaine Fraze, Farm Family Coach, coming to you today with another episode of the Farm Family Harmony podcast. And I'm happy to be joined by Glenn Dogterom, who is one of our coaches, who's also a CPA, has years and years of experience in dealing with all kinds of farm family scenarios and things that work and things that get stalled out and get stuck. So today, Glenn, you and I want to talk about realistic timelines for transition, and I think we also want to start on talking about what do you do when you're stuck with aging parents who don't want to give us the same traction that we're thinking about. So let's just go back to a scenario that you and I saw recently where the parents were in their late 70s and things are just stalled out. So what do you do when you're stuck?
One of the challenges that I think we face is that when individuals get into their mid-70s, they're looking for security. And so they're often concerned about just exactly how things are going to play out, what their role is going to be. And it's partially the apprehension driven by those factors that have them really not willing to dive into it. They don't understand how this can get resolved to everybody's satisfaction.
So they're kind of closing, you're saying they're kind of closing in and drawing in and hanging on tighter and tighter rather than expanding what their options are.
Yeah. And what the reality, what is on the table is that as they get older, the timelines are shrinking very rapidly.
Yes.
And if some unforeseen event happens, there's an accident or illness strikes that takes them out of the financial picture and out of the operational picture, and they're no longer doing what they could. And it could be something as simple as a fall or whatever else that incapacitates them for a few months, 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. There's no backup plan.
Right.
And if it's something more serious than that, how do you transition at that point? Now the scramble begins. And wouldn't you far sooner do it in a meaningful and thoughtful way as opposed to doing it under a huge amount of pressure and potentially not making the decisions that you would have otherwise?
Well, I think we also learned from a story that you and I heard recently of someone who experienced this, is it took a huge physical toll on the next generation because of the work they were forced to do that physically was hard on their bodies, not to mention the mental toll and what you just mentioned, the financial stress. So if there's a younger farmer listening to this, or someone in their 40s even, who's feeling frustrated that things are feeling really stuck. How do you create realistic timelines, Glenn? Because I think you've also had people in our membership site say to you, well, this should all be done in the next 6 months. So what does a realistic timeline look like for a 40-year-old farmer wanting to get more equity, more agreements, more plans in place?
I would start by just taking a look and assessing what skills, what they're bringing to the table. And actually, it may not hurt for them to even put together a business plan, which indicates to the parents, okay, here's what I look at, here's what I'm looking at. I would like to have an equity position by such and such a date. Here's what skills I'm going to bring to the table. Here's the skills that I may still need to work on. And those skills quite often are with respect to the finances, because the parents invariably have kept the finances totally to themselves. They've dealt with the bankers, they've dealt with the lawyers, but the children haven't been involved. And even if it's an adult child, quite often they just haven't involved them. And so what it is saying to the parents, in order for this to be successful and us to transition in a meaningful way, I need to be participating in all aspects of this business. And then presenting it to the parents and saying, is there any reason why we couldn't move forward on this, as opposed to waiting until something critical happens and we end up dealing with this through a will?
You're right.
Or through a power of attorney, or through some other means. It's just, you've always used the term, and I like it very much, it's better to pass these things along with a warm hand as opposed to a cold hand. And I think that's very appropriate.
Right. And I stood up in an audience and started clapping once when I was at a conference of national financial planners in Halifax. And the man from the podium said, it's better to give gifts with a warm hand than a cold one. I think out of 600 people, I was the only one clapping. But it's just so real right now to me. I just had a cousin that passed away from a fall, and she died 2 days ago. And I'm just sort of in that reminding again and remembering that things can happen quickly. And we're not here to put fear in people's hearts as a sense of urgency. We're here to give practical tools. So the first thing you said is to assess what skills you as a younger farmer are bringing to the table. I would also, and you also said, providing a business plan on what parts of the enterprise that person wants to be involved in, or what they would do to create more revenue and cash for the farm, which would be a really good thing. The other thing I think I would add too in financial preparedness, Glenn, is also to talk about how much debt they're willing to service, because I also come across, and tell me what your good conversation openers are for parents. When parents have this story that they're telling themselves, I don't want to I want to get all this debt cleared up before I transition things to the next generation. I'm going, what planet are you living on? Right? Because, so tell us more about what other things they can do to financially prepare, especially on the debt, or what the next gen can actually purchase.
I approach that a little bit differently, because
what
I would like to do is to say to the parents, okay, it's taken you 40 or 50 years to build this operation to the level it is. You have taken on risk. You've acquired different assets, whether it be land or expanded buildings, expanded your herd, or whatever it happens to have been. But during that period of time, you've taken on risk. Is it realistic to believe that your child isn't going to have to take on some risk in order to take this business over?
Yeah.
And you've acquired this over 40 years, but your child is looking at 25, 25, 30 years in order to pay this off. And so can you come up with a financial arrangement that will allow them to take on a manageable risk to facilitate the transition. And so, what kind of money do you need in retirement? And once again, you and I both agree with the term. We don't like to use the word retirement, but it's basically stepping back a little bit from the operation and still being involved and still having a participatory role, but doing a little bit less and allowing your successor to grow and to allow them to make some small mistakes along the way, because that's just not part of the growth process.
Well, and have skin in the game, right? And learning how to make decisions and the whole mentoring process. That's why we do use the term stepping back. You're not leaving the next generation to flounder on their own. You'll be there to mentor and teach and guide and make collaborative decisions in a positive culture, hopefully. But these timelines, Glenn, in terms of we have a young person listening to this and they go, okay, I've got my business plan. I've identified what my skills are. I'm still having a hard time getting my parents to come to the table. Now, you're an accountant. You've worked with accounting firms for all of your career, and you've seen all kinds of scenarios. So my next question is, how do you pull in your trusted team of advisors as the young farmer to say, look, Charlie, you're my accountant. You know my mother and father's business. You've been with them for the last 20 years. What do we need to do to break through this barrier of them not wanting to engage? So how do you as an accountant get pulled in, Glenn?
It's a little bit different when you have people that you've been working with for a long period of time, because I started this process quite often when individuals were in their teens.
Right. But you're developing.
You need to go to school. You need to work for somebody else for a couple of years, get some life experience, get some other skills from other farming operations, as opposed to jumping right directly into the family business. And so it was kind of a building process to get to the point where you could now apply to work on the farm. And then we would start talking about taking on an equity position. So it was a longer process. It would sometimes take years, 6, 7 years before people were ready. Quite often the people that we're encountering today are people who are experiencing, okay, we need to do something now. And we don't have all that build-up time. But you have to appreciate, or they have to appreciate, that it's going to take a period of time to sort through all of the various aspects of this. And I would say a fast transition is likely, under good circumstances, maybe 2 years at the that would be very quick, and maybe a little bit longer. And the reason is you want to go through at least 2 cycles.
So, Glenn, you're talking about whether or not those timelines can be short. So tell us again, once you get things sorted, you were just talking about things being about 2 years to sort everything out. Is that the most reasonable timeline? Because in our farm family with my father-in-law, when his brain was shrinking, we met on January the 6th, and we had the papers signed to transfer assets by the middle of June, 6 months later, because there was a health issue. So how do you navigate when some people feel that it's not going fast enough and people feel it's going too slow?
There again, I think it's a matter of whether the family is able to come to full agreement. In some cases, they have been, the successor has been working very, very closely with the parents. They understand a lot of the dynamics, and so it can go quicker. What I'm saying in most cases, and the reason I use the 2-year scenario, is because if they don't know what the finances look like, they haven't been making decisions as to the cropping or animal husbandry aspect of things. They haven't been doing the legal parts. It's going to take a little bit of time for comfort level to be built up. And you're absolutely correct. I mean, in some cases, because of circumstances, these things can be moved ahead much more quickly. But in order for it to be successful, people have to be on the same page, and people have to be willing to say, okay, we realize that there's going to be a little bit of a compromise along here, because if this is going to transition to, if the farm is going to transition to a family member, not everybody is necessarily going to end up with exactly the same amount. And it's sorting through some of those discussions to come up with a solution that works and retains family harmony. That's one of the things that is paramount in the coaching process, is to try to ensure that family stays together and is, congenial to each other.
Well, and our slogan is finding a harmony through understanding. And so what you're saying is unraveling that understanding may take 2 years or longer, but especially if you need to get financing in place, and especially as you said at the beginning of this podcast, if there isn't financial transparency. So in a great scenario that we're coaching, the founders agree where their income streams are going to come from and how much is going to come from the farm and how much is going to come from their personal wealth. And in a great scenario, the incoming successor and spouse both have income from another source as well to pay down personal lifestyle costs plus buy into the equity of the operation. And then we have the piece around the timelines for housing, because maybe mama is really ready to go to town, but dad says, no, I really like my shop. I'll stay here with my boots on for as long as possible. So I think it's important in this podcast too, when we're talking about realistic timelines, Glenn, is you and I have seen many times that if the founders do not agree, that's our first line of being stuck, right? So this is also great insight for the next gen. Do you really know whether or not your parents are aligned or not aligned in what they want for their futures? So that's another interesting conversation. And when you mentioned, I think too, around if there is a farming successor from the family, that means the farm is to be kept intact. That means the farm is not going to be cut up like a piece of pie to satisfy inheritance expectations of the non-farm heirs. And so the undiscussable that we want to coach people through is, how do you help everyone in the family be successful as you go through this transition, which means you're not making all of your children economically equal, which to me is just really hard news for, again, why parents are, I think, hesitant to make these transition plans, because they don't want to offend any of their children. Well, I'm sorry, folks, this is 2024, Glenn, and you and I have been doing this work for over 3 decades, and it's time to tell the truth. The truth is the farm is staying intact. There needs to be a plan. There need to be agreements, and the timelines need to be done proactively. So I want to thank you for your insight today. We really appreciate the long-term perspective that you have, and what you said earlier around being proactive to help people start planting the seed of transition ideas when your kids are teenagers, and sending them to work for other managers, and having open discussions about the books and the cash flow. So Glenn, what is one of your favorite stories that you'd like to close with how you in your mind's eye can see a family that really did things well in terms of being realistic with the timelines and having financial transparency? How did this family show up to you?
What that was, and I'm going to go back a little bit of ways, but again, it was one of those longer term transitions where things were planned in advance. And in this case here, what the individual had done is they the children went out, and some of them got professional designation. Some of them ended up doing well in other businesses. And then they came back to the company and said, we would like to participate. Here are the skill sets that I have. Do you have a need for somebody with these skills? And again, I looked at it from a business perspective. So I'm saying, okay, you are hiring that person on, and they are now going to become an owner. If you were talking to somebody from outside your family, how would you approach it?
Mm-hmm.
It really shouldn't be approached very much differently with a family member than a non-family member. Try to keep it as a business transaction. Yes, I happen to be, there might be a blood relationship there, but that shouldn't overpower the decision-making. Is that the right person to take over the business? And then if they are, work with them, mentor them, help them to be successful in their role when they take it over. And I think that was the one where it turned out to be very successful. It was a period, again, this one took a little bit of time, and because they had the time to deal with it. The children came in when they were in their late 20s, and the expectation was by their mid-30s, they would probably start to take equity positions and grow and take the parents out of their equity position somewhere when the parents were ready to move on. And so, yeah, that was very, very successful, but it was a long thought through and well planned and discussed on a regular basis. Like everybody in the family understood exactly what was happening. It wasn't just, okay, we're going to gather around the table for a business meeting and here's what we're trying to do.
No, so that's where I like to use the term unfolding. It's a journey, right? Transition is a journey, and those people were willing to take a long journey. It wasn't a sprint for them. It was more like a long planned out trip, and they just kept doing the next thing. And as they went on the journey, they kept the other family members informed as well. And that's a really happy ending because everybody knew what was happening and why it was happening and by when it's happening. So I would think, just to sum up today, folks, as you're listening to this, know that succession and transition is not a one-time, one-off event. The longer you have to unfold the plan, the better. And if you can keep everybody in the communication loop, that's fantastic. If you can share the finances and have financial transparency, that will help you navigate the dance around the fairness conversation and what everybody needs to be successful. So if you enjoyed listening to this today, give us a like or give us some feedback about the Farm Family Harmony podcast. If you're listening to this on your tractor, that's great. You also probably, as a farmer, don't have time to read books. And so I'd also encourage you to go to audible.com and find my book called Building Your Farm Legacy, which is on Audible. Thanks so much to Glenn Dogterom, who's one of our fantastic coaches at farmfamilycoach.com. He's a certified professional accountant, and he's seen just about everything in farm transition. So thanks again, Glenn, for your time today. And remember, it's your farm, it's your family, and it's your choice. So go out there and make really good choices to seek harmony through understanding so that you can have the life you've always wanted on your farm. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today.